of men who work for labor unions. We tried to get numbers, to help us. But the most prominent people, now I didn't.
How was it divided between working women and professional women? How many?
Well, you couldn't have, but 10% of your members you could only have 10% of your members from non-trade union people. And Miss Smiley, Louise O'Charlton, and Cora. I can't think of Cora's last name right now. I won't say Cora Thomas, but I'm not sure. It's lady lawyer. And then some of the wives of the guys in the red ore mines, but they couldn't come much because they lived down in Bessemer, and they had their own auxiliaries too. They had used to be back then. Practically all the labor unions, crafts had auxiliaries. Their wives belonged to the auxiliaries to the local, but they weren't working. Most of them weren't working women, but they were auxiliary members. The mine workers had an auxiliary. The red ore miners had auxiliaries, and every brotherhood had auxiliaries. We tried to get those women, but of course they were took up with their other activities.
What were the relationships like between the working women and the professional women? I mean, was the relationship good, or was there some condescension from one side to the other?
They were very, as far as our concern, we was very good because most of them were sympathetic, and they pretty well listened to us as guidance, and then they threw their political influence or their influence where they could help us. More or less, they give. We would set the program, and they would help us in any way they could. They were sympathetic to it.
And what kind of things did you try to do?
Well, I remember there was a lot of distinction among domestic workers in homes and restaurant workers, women who worked in restaurants, or girls, young girls. A lot of it was just practically unpleasantness they had to take from men in order to hold their jobs. And then, too, we participated in helping get up when the ore miners struck. We helped to get up food and clothing. We'd collect food and clothing from everywhere we could. And to help groups that was trying to organize if they needed anything.
Were the domestic workers themselves trying to do something about their conditions?
No, really they weren't. But we were trying to talk with these women who did hire. And I remember we got one woman kind of active. She finally didn't stay. There was head of a big dairy. Her husband owned a big dairy, big milk dairy there. And we tried to get her work through her clubs and to try to make it a little easier on these domestic workers. It might be hard for you to understand, it's hard for somebody to understand, but it was a hangover from the old days. Mostly black women, they were the least little thing that they were, if they quit a job, didn't like it somewhere, well, then the word get out to thieves, and they couldn't get a job nowhere else. Or if the man of the house or the sons, they wanted to abuse them. If the wife caught them, and actually she got the blame, and it's sordid in unpleasant things like that, mainly. That we were trying to work through this other group of women to make them understand that, stop doing this. And we had to do it. We were more or less trying to help them without their knowledge.
Trying to help the domestic workers
without their knowledge, because we knew what was going on among them.
I see.
And to make it a little easier on them, because they didn't dare. Certainly a black woman that day didn't dare try to get out. If she was going to be fired, if she was going to be blacklisted for quitting a job that she didn't like, she certainly wasn't going to come to somebody to ask for help.
Right. Were you aware of the Commission on Interracial Cooperation, the existence of that group based in Atlanta?
No, I didn't. I sure didn't.
Are the Women's Anti-Lynching Association?
No.
I didn't know whether they were active in Birmingham or not.
If there were, I didn't know anything.
How did your sister get to be president of the Women's Trade Union League? Was she involved in that from the beginning as well?
I'd rather not have this on tape, is what I'm going to say now.
You said that the league didn't hold together?
No,
Uh-huh.
And then about that time, you see...
Why was that? Why didn't it hold together?
I guess they just couldn't keep enough members.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't get the proper support.
Mm-hmm.
Back in them days, the men didn't really support the women like they should have either.
Mm-hmm.
And we had...
Where did you try to get support for the Women's Trade Union League? Did you try to
among the
get
unions. I think a lot of it was, well, I guess it was about the only chapter in the South.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't, of course, we, Amalgamated, you know, they helped Amalgamated in the Chicago start.
Uh-huh.
The Women's Trade Union League furnished the leadership
Right.
that helped build the Amalgamated.
Uh-huh.
And, but a lot of people didn't know anything about it.
Uh-huh.
And it
And
was
you
new
couldn't
to
get-
them, and
Mhm.
they're just indifferent toward it.
Why couldn't, were you involved in trying to get support from the unions or from the State Federation of Labor for the league?
No, most of the time, you see, when the league started, I worked the second shift. I didn't get to go to meetings even.
Mm-hmm.
It was only after I got fired, and it didn't last too long. I couldn't even go to meetings because I worked second shift, and they met at night.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I got fired, of course, I attended and tried to do. Then I went to work full-time as an organizer,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and was not in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
But the Birmingham chapter was short-lived.
I see. You went to a convention in Washington.
Yeah, during the time, yeah. I went...
To the 36th convention.
They gave it, I wasn't a delegate from the chapter. They gave it like, they give me the trip kindly as they called it a scholarship. The National League brought me because of my activity as a volunteer organizer and trying to help and to bring me up there, kindly as a little bonus, I guess, you know, giving me a little special attention. Polly Brown and Miss Morris and my sister went from the league, and Miss Molly Dowd. I went along as a guest or being paid for by the national organization.
I see. And what was that trip like for you?
Well, that's, you know, when I got fired for that, making that trip. When I got back, you know, I got fired, but as far as that, I never regretted it. I lived hard a year afterwards. I had a real tough year after I got fired, but it was needless to say, for a kid that never had been anywhere in their life. I remember we drove up there in my sister's car, and I wanted to stop at every road sign where these historic signs and read them all. I wanted to stop everywhere and read all the signs. I never had been. I never had been. I remember going through. We drove it, and we started like at 6 o'clock in the evening, and we drove as long as we could and stopped to spend the night. And I had never been in South Carolina. Of course, going through that Piedmont Regency and all them big textile mills lit up at night, I never had seen such big textile mills in my life. And it impressed me seeing we went through the Piedmont region, you know, Highway 11, right up through there. And I think we drove we started about 6 o'clock in the evening. It was in May. I believe we drove I don't know where we stopped to spend the first night, but we got a room in a tourist home, they called it, a house that rented rooms to tourists. And I remember the next morning when we started out, we went the wrong way. The road signs weren't marked as good as they are now, north or south, and we were to change highways at this particular town. And the next morning we drove 50 miles the wrong way on the road before we realized we was not going toward Washington. And I can't remember, but we seemed that we drove to Wet in the morning, and we slept till about 7, 8 o'clock, and then finished driving into Washington the next day. and arrived in Washington about 7 o'clock on the second night. It seems like we just spent one night on the road. And we met down at the hotel before we went up to the White House, because Ms. Roosevelt had invited the Alabama and the New York delegation to be her guest at the White House, because she was a member of the New York League. And, of course, it was we had breakfast with her every morning and chatted with her. The first night we was there, we were welcomed by the president himself. And we had a nice chat with him. And it's the first time I knew that he was in a wheelchair. You know, I did not know that he had to be in a wheelchair. And the youngest son, John, was with him. And although I'd known he'd had infantile paralysis, I didn't know that he was, that bad, crippled. And it was quite an experience.
What did you think about the convention itself?
Oh, our main thing right then was trying to get the Ellenbogen textile bill passed, which was a minimum wage law for textile workers. And we had already accomplished, getting prison labor, work out of the prisons. And through the labor movement and other groups, not primarily union groups, but other groups. And
do you remember discussion at that convention about whether to put money into organizing the league in the South?
yes. And to help organizing the unorganized, yes. To do what they could.
They were pulling back from the South, really, about that time. The league was not...
Well, it hadn't made its gains in the South. No, it never did. Mainly around New York, Chicago, places like that.
So how did it come about that trip caused you to lose your job?
Well, you see, I knew I was going, and I had gone and asked my boss if I could be off. I didn't tell him why I wanted to be off, but I went and said, I'd like to be off a week of so-and-so, whichever week in May this was. And he said, well, wait till nearer the time and come and ask me again, and if I can possibly do without you, I'll let you go, let you be off. So about the week or so beforehand, I went and said, remember, Joe, I asked you I wanted off the week of so-and-so. And he said, okay. I never told him why. He never asked me. But when all this came out in the paper about us being guests of the White House and everything, when I got back, I didn't have a job because of my union activity.
There were articles in the
it come out in the newspaper, our pictures and everything, Because they thought it was quite a treat,
So you just, you arrived back at work and walked in?
When I started to go in, I was called to come by the big office. The big office sat out here away from the mill, like a little house. And you go around the office to go inside the entrance to the mill. And I started to go around. They picked on the window and told me to come in the office. So the general superintendent they had another place in Mississippi. And I said, I didn't know we had any unions here. I said, we don't. And he said, well, what is this thing you just went to? And I tried to explain to him. Well, his daughter was there, and she was right interested. She was trying to ask me what all happened, and wanted to know from me, about the trip. Well, he made her be quiet. So he told me, well, they didn't need me anymore.
So that was it?
That was it.
How did you live then that year?
Well, I had this girlfriend who had worked there in the plant with me. She worked on WPA. And I stayed with her. She had a furnished room, sleeping room. And she and I had a donut and a cup of coffee every morning. Then Miss Bertie Maxwell, whose husband worked in the Slough Sherfield plant, me and her had been very active. She'd worked in a bakery, and we'd been very active in our days when I was on the organizing committee. I used to come to town early before I had to go to work, and she'd meet me downtown. We'd go around to these bakers trying to organize them. So she'd always invite me. It was standing invitation for me to come to her house at night for supper. So that's how I lived. As far as money, I had once in a while, maybe one of the guys would slip me a couple of dollars, just to help me out.
And you kept doing volunteer organizing?
Yeah, all this time.
Who for?
Well, I helped any. I worked with the Mine Workers Union, the Red Ore Miners. I tried to help them strengthen their auxiliaries. The women's in the auxiliaries, every time they had a meeting, they'd invite me. We'd have these all-day affairs. They'd bring lunch, and they'd have little projects, and it's like clubs, but they were interested in helping unions. And they'd have all-day meetings. I attended all those, and there's any number of them going on around Birmingham. I worked with those ladies and tried to help them do things that would help the labor movement, especially buying union-made products. That was one of our prime objectives in the auxiliaries. And I'd visited and tried to help build up the auxiliaries. I tried to help organize the steel mills. I'd help deliver the leaflets at the plant gates. Become very good friends with a group of men that later on became representatives of the steel workers, and some of them directors. I came out of those mills there in Inslee and Fairfield. And when I got acquainted with them through the organizing efforts in the 30s. Well, they didn't get their unions until in the 40s.
I see. So
Bill Crawford, who migrated to Alabama from Akron, Ohio, came there and worked in a sheet mill. His son's now a representative. Bill became director here in Atlanta later on. And Earl Crowder, who went on as staff of the United Steel Workers. Rube Farr, who was director of steel in Birmingham. Oh, any number of guys, and guys in the Mine Workers Union.
How did you get your first paid organizing job?
When the drive went on,
Textile
actually,
Workers Organizing Committee was set up.
Yes, that's the first. Mr. Mitch, who was district president of the United Mine Workers, called me up and asked me to come down to his office.
William Mitch.
And I went down there.
1936, you think? 1936, 1937?
Yeah, a lot of part of 36.
Latter part of 36.
And he called me up and asked me to. I remember it was raining like hell that day, pouring down the rain. And I went up there, and he told me that there was going to be some organizers put on to organize textile. And asked me why didn't I send in my application. I was interested in the job. And I said, I don't know if I can do it. He said, well, that's what you've been doing. He said, what do you think you've been doing but organizing? So that's why I made application for the job. And was put on staff.
So you were working under Steve Nance then, who was the...
Franz Daniel actually hired me, and I cannot remember. I think they split up the area, and Franz went up into Greenville and that area, and then Nance was put in charge.
Did you go
I
up
didn't
to
know
Atlanta
Nance very
to
well.
be interviewed?
Yeah, by Franz Daniel.
And so you started organizing for them then. What was that? What did you do? What was that like?
Well, I came back to the Birmingham area and tried to, we had tried to organize, and we tried to organize, and we had some semblance, still some interest in that Comer mill there in Avondale. And I primarily first worked in there, and around Birmingham. And I guess I was on there about a year. Now, during this time,
Go ahead.
you see, at the time I was put on the staff, I was I was active in trying to help Homer Welch, who was an organizer for the United Textile Workers, had gotten into trouble in Talladega. After, you see, they didn't strike, the general textile strike, and after the strike was called over, they got a wage cut. They got very anxious for a union, and Homer went down there and he signed up, and they came out on strike. And they had some shooting occurred on the picket line or down dusk dark one night, one afternoon late. And some people were shot, and they were after Homer Ford, of course, who represented them. And he had sneaked away, got away, and came into Birmingham because he felt that if he was arrested down there, he would not have a chance. And it so happened that one of the guys active in the strike, and I believe they had a local set up. I believe he was the president. Can't remember his name. I'd have to look in the file.
Mm-hmm.
But he was arrested and put in jail there that night, and they found him hung next morning. They claim he hung himself, but nobody believes it.
Mm-hmm.
We went down there the night it happened. We heard about it. We were in Birmingham. And when we got down there, a man who worked for the Conciliation Service, Mr. Cooper, happened to be with us. And he went along with us down there. And we got down there, they had a bunch of women in jail that was littered in the back with buckshot, strikers. And they wouldn't let him see a doctor. And he didn't exactly lie, but he went up there and told them that he was representing the United States government. He demanded they see a doctor. He didn't say what division, but it got done the trick. So Homer stayed in jail in Birmingham, for a long time, about 6 months. And during this time, Noah Beddoe, who was considered about the best criminal lawyer in Birmingham at that time. No, I don't mean Noah, I mean Roderick Beddoe. Roderick Beddoe had been hired to represent him or to defend him. He was charged with murder. And of course, Talladega County was trying to get him back. And of course, we had more strength for the Union in Jefferson County, and we were trying to hold him in jail there, because we felt if he went back down there, he would not get, probably, we knew he wouldn't get good treatment. Probably the same thing happened to him that happened to the other man. So there was bickering back and forth between the two counties, but he stayed in Birmingham until it came to trial. But during this time, there was a little bit, it seemed like, I don't know, I don't want to say how it came about. I don't know if I actually know. But anyway, Homer was telling me that when he was going to trial that Roderick had been pulled off the case, and that he felt that Roderick, having done all this primary work, was better to represent him than bringing a new person in to represent him. And he said that the union wasn't going to pay for the lawyer, for Roderick. So I was trying, at that time we had, in the textile locals, we had joint councils set up, and they had meetings about twice a year. The locals didn't meet in the central place over the weekend, have council meetings, council of textile workers. And I had been going around to all local unions, not just the textile, but any local union, trying to make up money to help pay for defense attorney for Homer. I was one of the ones that were trying to help him get up some money for defense to keep Roderick Beddoe. So I got up at the Council of Textile Workers and asked, told them the case and asked them. Of course, Homer coming from textile, he was well liked. Well, there was a guy there who worked for the Textile Workers Union. He goes and tells them, and I'm trying to set up, this is the story I got later, that he said I was trying to set up dual union.
I can't understand how you would get that story out of trying to raise money for somebody.
Well, I'll tell you what I think. I think he had smelt that there was a layoff coming, and he was trying to make some way or another to keep kept on himself. That's what I believe. And I don't either. I don't know either, but that's exactly what I found later. So, but I wasn't fired. I was laid off in the layoff.
I see.
And while he came on to work after I did, he was kept on. I heard later that's and Homer was let go too. See. So Homer said, I'm going to go to New York and talk to him. And I said, well, I'm not. If that's how they feel, I said, well, I'll just go ahead and about my business. So I didn't do anything about it. I just took the layoff. But my sister at that time was on the payroll of the textile, and she came to work after I did. They kept her. So I just went with her and worked on just like I had been. And she'd take off. Actually, I was doing her job because she'd take off and go somewhere. I was there doing the work. And she's gone, but that's neither here nor there. But I still worked. And she fed me because she had a check. And I'd go with her, but I was doing the work because...
So you were out of a job again?
I didn't have a paycheck. I was out. Well, I was working, but I wasn't getting paid for it. So then the typographical union, they had I just don't know what I was going to do. But in the meantime, my sister got laid off from textile, and she didn't have anything to do. So consequently, I didn't. She had been feeding me because I'd been actually doing her work. And so I went back to Birmingham. And that's when I went back. Me and Ruth got us an apartment together. This old friend of mine I told you I lived with, we got an apartment. She still worked for WPA, and I was still trying to find some work. So the typographical union had their national convention in Birmingham, and the president of the local, they didn't have too many women in their union, so they wanted some women to kindly be hostess and help them with their social affairs and things. So they asked me if I'd help them. Of course, I wasn't getting paid for it. Now I was doing it, but I was happy to do it. So I'd been down there, and it was about midnight, and I'd gone home, and I just got in bed. Clyde Mills called me. He was a member of the typographic union, and he had been put on as Southern Director for the Amalgamated Clothing. He called me up, and well, actually, Miles Horton called me first. Said, "Hey, Eula, what you doing?" I said, "God, I might have just laid down." I said, "I want to run home and get me a few hours sleep. I haven't had any sleep." And he said, "I got somebody here I want you to talk to."
Now, where had you met Miles Horton?
Oh, I met Miles when I was in the textile. In Memphis, Tennessee is where I met Miles. I was working in Memphis with the Textile Workers Union. And I met him. It's quite funny how I met Miles. I was staying at this hotel, and he called me up, and he told me who he was. And I said, "You wait, I'll come down to the lobby," because like I told you a while ago, we were very careful not to let old men come to our room. And Memphis, that's right. And Memphis at that time, particularly, the auto workers was really in a hassle with the Ford Company. And Memphis was really bad. They was all kinds of labor spies. And the Crump machine was trying to keep unions out of Shelby County, and particularly Memphis. And we had to be doubly careful. The ILG had a strike on at the time. And Louise McLaren was there.
Is that where you met her?
And Miles would last about that till today. I said, "You wait right there. I don't go meet him by myself. I call Homer's room." And Homer Welch was there with me. That's the last assignment me and him had for the textile work, TWOC. And he says, I said, "Go down, the guy down in the lobby says he's Miles Horton, and he's from Highlander Folk School, and he's for the unions also." I said, "I want you to go down there with me." So we went down, and that's when I met Miles.
Interesting.
And so Miles went and called me, and so Clyde says, "Hey, how would you like to go to work in Amalgamated Clothing Workers?" And I said, "Fine, when do I start?" He says, "Well, get up and come back down here. I got to leave town." And I got up out of bed and go back down there and talk to Clyde. But Miles told me later that that he was asking about my sister Clara. And he said, "That ain't the one you want." He says, "You got them mixed up." He said, "The one you want, Eula McGill." Now, that's what Miles told me later. He said, "No, you got the wrong person." He said, "It's her sister that you really want." So evidently them old friends of my sister's still trying to... I'm sorry to say it, but my sister's just that type of person. She just couldn't stick to nothing. She went to work later with the International Lady Garment Workers. She couldn't stay at it. She didn't have the patience that it takes, you know, to... She didn't really have a heart in it like you have to have it. That's what I think, you know.
How come you never went to work for the WPA when you were...
Oh, I worked one day for WPA.
Why did you hesitate so long to go that way?
I don't know. I guess we was always independent. My mother was that type of person. I remember when Depression, during the Hoover days, they came, they're sending flour, you know. The government was issuing flour out to people. Pop said, "I think I'll go down and get a sack of that flour." Mama said, "No, you ain't going down and get it. No, sir, I ain't taking the weed. We got something to eat. We don't need to go down and get that flour." I don't know. I just had a feeling that it was giving up. I was giving up. It was just a last, and it was a last resort. I just didn't feel like I could continue on. This girl working on the WBA and her keeping me up, and me feeling like maybe she thought I was too good, and so I went down and got to work one day on WPA.
What did you do?
They put me to work with sandpaper and school desk.
And that same day you got a job?
That's that night. So when I left work, see, I went home and dressed and went down to the Typographic Union for the affairs that night. And I just got home about midnight and went to bed. Because I walked from the hotel where it was out to where our apartment was. Good walk. But
was this in 1938? Do you know?
No, it was in 39, because I went to work on the Amalgamated payroll in 39.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 39 you started to work for them. Did you know the other people that were TWLC organizers, the other Southerners that they put on?
Oh, the
that
Southerners?
campaign? Who did you work most closely with?
With Homer Welch and Tommy Sparks. Tommy Sparks worked while he was one. And I stayed mostly around Birmingham, and there wasn't much textile. See, most of the textile now, of course, there was Helen Gregory, Matt Lynch, but we all kind of worked together there. Then amalgamated. I can't separate. Matt was with Hosier Division. Helen was with Hosier Division. And Matt's president of the State Labor Council of Tennessee now. You know, Matt Lynch. But let me see. Ray Nixon. Oh, well, I can't remember. Ray was...
When you went to work for Amalgamated, then you went to Atlanta. You moved to
my
Atlanta.
first assignment was here. On the air shop. Then I went from there to Greenville, South Carolina.
Did you get involved right away in the Cluett Peabody plant?
Yeah. My first assignment with Amalgamated was on this, me and May Bagwell.
Tell me about May Bagwell. What was she like?
Very nice person. Her home was here. And me and May worked together. And
she wasn't a worker herself.
No. May's, I don't know what May's real background was. She worked with Y, with women workers somewhere or another. I never did.
But she was an organizer.
Oh, well, that's where a lot of organizers, we had a lot of organizers that didn't come out of the industry then. We didn't have nobody to pull from. And a lot of our people in our membership wouldn't have fitted in at that time down here. Some of our northern organizers, they wouldn't have been accepted.
So in order to have southern organizers, you hired people that didn't come out of the plant.
Most of the kids, college students, and people who were real dedicated people. Real dedicated people. And May, and Hilda Cobb, and there's a girl named Clemmy Shucks. We used to label her Shucks and Cobb. And Griselda Kuhlman.
Now, when you went on with Amalgamated, were there very many women organizers?
No, that was the beginning of women. Even textile didn't hire many women.
Why did they hire
I don't know. The Amalgamated? Well, Amalgamated has been a different union. My history of the Amalgamated you studied, it's just been more liberal and more broad-minded, more socially-minded, I think, than any other union.
Were you aware of that before you went to work?
Yes, when I was I used to know an old tailor at home. His name was Mueller, Mueller. I used to go down there on Saturday morning and sit and talk with him a lot. I don't know how I got acquainted. Yes, I do. I got acquainted with him when I was trying to organize the alteration workers in the stores. When I was on the organizing committee of the Central Labor Union. I'd go around and try to organize these alteration workers in these clothing stores. And he was a member of the Journeyman Tailors Union. And about that time they had become affiliated with the Amalgamated Clothing Workers. And he was telling me about the Amalgamated Clothing Workers and what, about his. I used to go around on Saturday mornings and sit with him while he worked. And he really gave me an education in the Amalgamated Clothing Workers.
Well, what was
Told me all about Hillman and Resnicek and Rosenblum.
What was it like being a single woman, paid organizer, traveling around, living in motels? I mean, was that?
Well, at first we didn't live in hotels. We might stay in a hotel a night or two, but then we had to get a furnished room. There wasn't money to pay hotel bills. Usually we got a furnished room. And I remember very well what I first got. When I went to work for the union, I got $25 a week. And I couldn't afford a car. Of course, cars, when you're organizing textile mills, back then weren't as important as they are now, because the people lived in villages, and you could walk from house to house. And I got $5 a week for meals and my room rent.
Was this from Amalgamated that you got this, or from TWC?
Yeah.
What did you make when you worked for TWC?
I made $20 a week when I worked. I don't remember if I ever got a raise. But I got $20 a week. And, of course, we paid bus fare, car fare. And I didn't get any food allowance because I didn't pay me any food allowance. But you didn't get along too good on that. Done
When
the
you
best
were working
you could.
for Amalgamated, were you, were most of the other organizers men?
When I first went to work with Amalgamated in '39, were most men. Let's see, it was I and Hilda and Griselda, Polly Galloway. No, we was mostly women.
You're mostly women.
We had, later on, Ed Blair come to work later on. And we had, of course, Clyde, the director, and then Buck Borer was director. Most of us were women. Most of us were women.
Did you have, thinking back, do you see yourself having special problems or special advantages being a woman in that kind of work? In some ways was it harder, some ways was it easier than if you'd been a man?
No, I don't see that it was certainly any easier. In some cases, the first, I think that it was a little harder in that women tend to listen to men more than they do women. And that's true today to some extent. Not so much in our trade, in the factories now, because as I grow older, I've tended to have more respect from people listening to me by my vast experience that I've drawn from. But, and two men resent sometimes, especially a young woman trying to tell them something.
Right.
But actually, I never had, one of the people, men I work with, I was never treated any different from the people I work with. And men in the labor movement than if I'd been a man. Now, I can truthfully say that is my case. And never was tried to be held back. I never was tried to look down. I didn't know that they knew more of me because I was a man. I never had that problem. From the day I first entered the labor movement and got active in the Central Labor Union, I never had that. I just never had that kind of...
Don't you think other women
I've had
that problem?
I had men oppose me when I was trying to get their wives active in those auxiliaries, telling me that their wives had a place in the home and I ought to marry and, and have me a home. And I said, well, what if I don't want to, you know? They told me I ought to be back home raising kids instead of out trying to work. Anyway, I did have some opposition. Some men, I don't know why they didn't want their women active. Why they didn't want their women. Didn't want their women even active in their own auxiliaries. That they belonged to the union. I'd try to tell them, look, your wife spends the money. Isn't it best that she be educated in union? I didn't say union orientated because we didn't use them words in those days. But then better she know what the story is so she can support you. But I did have that problem. But as far as
what about people?
These are mostly from rank and file men or officers of local unions, not from international people.
What about people's attitude toward a young woman traveling alone and living that kind of unusual life?
Well, a lot of people, I think, would suspect the worst of you, because the women didn't. They do all, and even today, sometimes, do you drive by yourself? There's still women today who would ask me, do you mean you travel by yourself? Aren't you afraid? I've had, even today I get that. When I travel maybe distances, you know. Like I go somewhere to a meeting outside of Atlanta, 50, 75 miles, and I drive back tonight. You mean you're going to drive back tonight by yourself? And it's just something that they never have done, and they just can't understand that we do it.
Well, was it hard for you at all when you first started out to be so independent and take care of yourself and go into strange situations, move around so much?
Well, I think that I got a lot of basic training before I ever went on the staff and started traveling, that I tried to handle myself and approach people in such a manner that I put them at ease. Now, sometimes you run into a lot of people who would insult you.
What kind of people?
Well, a lot of you sort of people, they try to say, why don't you get a job and go to work and try to stir up trouble? Why are you coming around trying to stir up trouble while we're happy? The boss gave me a job when I needed one. And you're just, in other words, they look upon us like it's some kind of a racket, like we're they're doing us a favor to join the union. In other words, they're doing something for us that they're not doing something for themselves. And sometimes people do it to hide their fear, actually. I don't feel, you can't let these things bother you, and you can't feel hurt at these people. You have to understand that it's new to them. And I always remember where I was when I worked in the plant, and how I saw people around me, and why I used to be afraid. Every time I see the boss coming, I was afraid he's going to come down and jump on me or fire me. And I always try to remember, I've never forgotten that I worked in the plant, just like these people, and had my fears and anxieties. And while I never bought nothing on the credit, you couldn't get credit when I never owed nobody nothing, because I didn't have enough money to buy nothing. I had to get by best I could. I never bought anything on the credit in my whole life until I went on the staff as an organizer and bought me an automobile, first automobile. I had to buy it in my sister's name because I didn't have no credit rate. she had to go on it with me so I could buy an automobile because I didn't have any credit rating. Because you could know today people, credit's easy to get, and in a way they have more to lose if they join and lose a job. And that fear of losing that job is still there. People weren't afraid of that in the old days because hell is hungry working. And it's barely existing. As my mother told my sister when she was trying to talk me out of being active in the union, my mother said, what if she loses her job? She's eating and sleeping, and she'll eat and sleep some way if she loses a job. So that's the way most of the people felt in the textile mills in the early days. What have I got to lose?
And when you were working in Atlanta, Steve Nance died in '38, so I guess he
Yes,
wasn't
right.
there when you went to Atlanta.
No, he died not long after,
Who was your boss,
let me
Bud
go.
Burrow?
Clyde Mills. Clyde was the
He was the director of the Southern Campaign.
yeah.
What was wasn't Bora in Atlanta?
Buck came on after Clyde. Clyde left and went with the National Mediation Service.
Who were some of the other people you were involved with in Atlanta?
To Greenville to the wing shirt and tried to start a campaign there. And
so you weren't in Atlanta very long?
Not very long at that time.
I see. So you didn't really follow that Pruitt Peabody campaign all the way
No,
through?
May didn't either. May left. She left the Amalgamated. And I don't know where May went when she left. She volunteered to left the Amalgamated. And I don't know. I told you I was going to try to find out where she was from Connie, but I haven't had the opportunity to.
Did you run into the Atlanta Industrial Union Council?
Yes.
What
Charlie
was that?
Gilman was president of it. Charlie worked, and they were very helpful to us in the era. The automobile workers, had gotten organized here, and Charlie Gilman was president. And he was president of Central. I made a trip or two there.
Trip or two where?
To the meetings.
Oh.
I made a couple of meetings. And there's automobile workers, as I remember, it's about the only industrial union on the CIO,
What about
steel.
What about Lucy Randolph Mason?
Lucy. Poor Miss Lucy.
What did you think about her?
When she first came, she contacted me when she first came to Alabama, and as I say, I was working with the auxiliaries. It's during the time that I was without a job, without a paycheck. Had a big job, but without no paycheck. And she was put on by John L. Lewis. And I think John L. thought with her name and her background and all that she'd be a big factor in trying to neutralize some of the feeling among the bosses, the manufacturers. I know when Miss Lucy came into Birmingham, she contacted me, and I went down to meet her. And she was telling me that what she was going to try to do, she was going to talk to the Comers and some of these big officials. She had an appointment with Mr. Comer the next day. I said, Miss Lucy, you're wasting your time. Oh, he supported Roosevelt, blah, 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 blah. I said, Miss Lucy, you're wasting your time. She discovered she was wasting her time. So it really didn't, I don't think it had any effect on the labor movement. You ain't going to reach bosses that way.
Right.
You're going to reach bosses when the workers organize and have enough bargaining strength to make them talk to them. That's usually the time when you get the bosses to sit down and talk with you.
Well, did you think at the time that kind of PR work that she was supposed to be doing was pretty futile? I mean, did other people think that?
I don't know how the people felt. I thought, in the first place, well, I didn't do anything because maybe I thought, well, maybe I'm not smart enough to figure it out. Maybe it is something, but I did not think that was the way you would approach. I mean, that's like starting, just like the Republicans, just like Jerry Ford's going to give this tax break again to the manufacturers so they'll hire labor. Just like Eisenhower in the 50s. It just don't work that way. You have to start at the bottom. You have to put money in people's pockets to spend, to buy things so they can make more things. If there's, well, the same way with the labor movement. You don't organize for going and saying the boss says, hey, be a nice guy and let us have a union in here. Now, if we could do that way, I'd be perfectly happy to do it. But then I'd want to educate the workers to think for themselves and to run their own union. But you're not going to meet that kind of enlightened management then or now. Very seldom will you run into a type of person who recognizes and realizes their workers have a right to organize and don't resist their efforts. There's very few of them. And today with the big conglomerates, you don't even see the man who owns it. Everybody's just working for the big corporation. Everybody's afraid of their own jobs. So, unless you organize the workers and make them want to help themselves, your chance of helping the worker or helping the worker help themselves is pretty futile. There's nobody going to deliver it to you on a silver platter.
Were people resentful at all of the money and going to somebody like Lucy Randolph Mason? I mean, of her activities and her presence and her being hired on the staff and everything. Was there any?
I didn't hear any.
disgruntlement?
I don't think that, I guess they thought, if they thought at all, I just felt like, well, it's just, can't hurt us, and if it might help us, but I don't think, Gilman supported her pretty much,
Gilman.
I think. They at first supported her very much. But I never had much dealings with her because she's mainly around Atlanta. That first encounter, you know, and I run into her in meetings now and then. But we never crossed paths much.
What about, this is just kind of a general question about workers' education. You ever much involved in the workers' education arm of the union? Or
No.
Do you see that as what kind of importance do you attach to that, that kind of stuff?
I think worker education in our industry has to be a continuing thing. You cannot pick up people out off a machine and take them to a school of a week or two and expect them to come back and make good leaders. They gain something, but most of the time you try to cram them with so much that to me it confuses them and they don't know what to do when they come back. They don't know what they've learned. In fact, they haven't learned very much. Because going away for just a week or two or something like that is not the least you can do. You might can instill them into coming back and trying to learn more as they come back. But I always, when I was a business agent, I tried to carry my educational program on at the same time I was handling my union work. I always tried when I had a grievance, a worker had a grievance, when we settled that grievance, explain to that worker how we got it settled, and if we had to compromise, why we had to take a compromise, and if we lost it, why we lost it, and explain to them the terms of the agreement, and also try to tell them something about the economics of the industry, and if we didn't get it settled, why we didn't get it settled, because we weren't strong enough to get it settled, because we weren't strong enough in the industry to get the kind of contract we needed. Every union meeting, I set a part aside under good and welfare that I got up and talked to them about something, current events, or talked to them something about building their union stronger and why they had to. I think that the business agent can do the best job, if they are so minded to, and will adapt themselves, is to educate their members, if their members will come to meetings. If they don't come to meetings, I think that you have, and I did this. I don't say everybody can. I didn't have a home life. My whole life was in the union. At lunch hour, I was at the plant. If I wasn't everywhere I was in, where my shops were, if I was in town that day, I was at the plant at noontime. And if there's a lunchroom in the plant, I was in that lunchroom trying to get acquainted and talk just among the general membership. If they had any questions they want to ask, mainly I encouraged them to attend their meetings. Because if you're going to get them to attend meetings, and you make that meeting interesting, usually they'll come back. And I am very fortunate to say when I was a business agent, with the exception of one of my locals, I had good attendance at meetings. And I had what I call a continuum. I had a new member packet that I'd made up myself about mainly about how to protect their earnings, how to take their grievance up, who the job steward was, and I give these to job stewards. And I tried to talk to every new worker that was hired. I didn't always make it, but I tried to.
Well,
when I get the names, I'd look them up at lunchtime.
In the 30s and 40s, what did you think about the concept of resident workers' education that Highlander and the Southern Summer School were trying to do? What did you think about that? How much
for 2 or
good
3
did you
months, yeah.
think?
Some very good work was done, I think.
So you thought that was a thing?
Yes, I did. I
Did
think if
you-
you're going with this year, just institutes for a week or two, or like going up to this college there. And I'm very sorry to say this, but I think you recognize it. And I'm not throwing no slur at no workers, because there's college students today that don't even know when they attend these things what the people's talking about. They can't listen and understand. First place, they can't read with understanding. Am I right? So I have gone to meetings when I sit there and I know those people weren't even, I can look at their eyes and look at them and tell they didn't even know what in the hell was being said. And if you don't get right down to them and talk to them at their level, I have talked to college graduates that didn't understand what I was talking about when I talked about the labor movement. There's been nothing in the schools. A little, maybe a paragraph in there.
Right, exactly.
And so what do you expect? So are you going to, in 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to educate a worker, whether they're at college level or can't read and write? I'd rather take the one sometimes can't read and write and try to talk some sense to them than one of these persons that thinks they know it all and don't know a damn thing.
Did you recruit people as you were working as an organizer to go to the workshops at Highlander at the Southern Summer School? Did you find
We
people and
supported
send
Highlander. Amalgamated did, because number one, I want to say now that we never had as far as I know, and certainly in any place I've ever been, we never had a segregated meeting. We held a lot of our conferences things at Highlander so that we would not have to segregate our members, because we had 2 all-black local unions, all black. One in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and one in Montgomery, Alabama. Then we had the laundry workers in Chattanooga that was majority black. And that was before they hired them mostly in shops, for the Fair Employment Practice Act. So we always had we used Highlander a lot for that reason. So that we used Montreat for some too. For those reasons, we tried to pick those places so that we would not have to segregate our members, so that we could
But did you feel that
stay together?
That picking out promising union people from the locals and sending them to someplace like Highlander was effective in creating leadership, local leadership? Did you see that actually happen?
No, I can't say that I have. A lot of times, maybe the one who was able to could be free to go. Now, you must think about that. We've got majority women. A lot of women can't up and go, can't leave the family. So consequently, maybe somebody went who was convenient for them to go and could go, but they weren't the best people to have gone. So maybe sometimes we didn't get the best candidate. Then some who did go come back, and they thought they knew it all, and so they were ineffective because of their attitude when they came back, because they'd been away for school 2 or 3 weeks. All of a sudden, they had all the answers.
Right.
So they didn't approach the people right, so it was ineffective.
What was your contact with Louise McLaren?
I met up with her in Memphis during the time.
Did you know her then after that?
No, I never. After that, I never did. Like I said, I'd lost track of her. And but that a few weeks that I was there in Memphis, and I was got my letter of termination while I was in Memphis, and she was there with the ILG, and they had a strike on it.
What about Brownie Lee Jones?
I don't remember Brownie Lee. That name sounds familiar, Brownie.
She was, she took over the Southern Summer School in later on in the 40s when it moved to Richmond. She was
That name sounds familiar, but you see, that then there from the 43 up until about 50, I was a business agent confined to Tennessee and didn't travel around as much as I had as an organizer and didn't come in contact with people. And I didn't come in contact with too many people in North and South Carolina until just, say, the last 3 years. That I'm getting in that area. And a lot of people are names to me that I maybe have met or maybe I didn't meet, but I didn't really know them.
Oh, let me ask you about this little incident. In Lucy Randolph Mason's book, To Win These Rights, she tells about this. Do you know what I'm talking about? This incident in which she says she doesn't tell the name of the town, but some town, she calls it blank, where the Amalgamated was organizing, sent Ed Blair in to organize, and he was supposed to run out of town, and they sent you in, and you were forced to leave your hotel room and leave town, and then
She's
they
got
sent
that all
her
mixed
in.
up. She's got that all mixed up.
Do you know what?
Miss Lucy must have been out of her mind when she wrote that thing, because that's all a mistake, and I read that. She's talking about Sparta, Tennessee. What happened to us? And Lucy come up there to investigate afterwards and talk about it. The Amalgamated didn't send her in. Ed was over there at Sparta. He called me up and told me that they let him call me. I was in Knoxville. And he said, Eula, these men are going to take me out of town. And he said, can you come get me? Ed didn't have a car. He just come back out of the Navy. And he goes, no, that was before he went to the Navy. Anyhow, didn't have a car. He hadn't been on stage. That's before he went to the Navy. That's right, because it was early 40s. He said, they're going to take me to Cookville. Will you pick me up in Cookville? And I said, yes, I'll pick you up. So I drove. It was about 9, 10 o'clock when he called me. And it's a good drive from there to Cookville, from Knoxville to Cookville. Back then there were crooked roads. Well, sometime up in the morning after midnight, as I come to Crossville, before. See, here's Crossville, here's Sparta, and here's Cookville. And I drive up to, here stands Ed out in the middle of the street. Because they brought him to Crossville. After he told me this was going to take him to Cookville, they decided to bring him to Crossville. So he's standing in the middle of the street so that I won't lose him, so I don't miss him when I pick him up. And that's what happened. I went over to get him. They didn't send me in. I went over to get him. But now Lucy come back up there later and talked to us. She went around and talked to some newspaper men and tried to find out what happened, blah, blah, blah. But that's what happened. I read that, because Lucy's all mixed up. You know, she got a little bit off. I think about the time she wrote that book, it was not too, there's things that I remember, just she didn't have it right, like I knew it. And if you notice, she praised Charlie all the way.
Yeah. What about, why did you went to La Follette then in 43 as business agent?
Yeah.
Did you want to, why were you sent there, or why did you?
Well, now that's another place. Ed was in there. We was started to have some trouble with, that time John L. left the CIO.
Now La Follette had been organized in 37.
Yeah.
Atlas, and that was a big victory really for Amalgamated. And then what happened by 43? What was the situation?
Well, of course, the miners claimed credit for organizing it for us. But, of course, we had some damn good people in there. Charlie Handy and Elaine Wright. Of course, the miners furnished the muscle.
Charlie Handy and who?
Handy. Charlie Handy and Elaine Wright. They were married, but she went by Elaine Wright. They were man and wife. But
now, you mean they were there in 37?
Yeah, that's right. They was handling the campaign. And
the mine workers did.
Of course, we asked their support, but that's all they gave us, of course, which was appreciated, and we needed it, and we certainly don't belittle it. But they certainly did a lot did a lot for us, but they certainly didn't organize it, because we had me money. We gave them a lot of money, lost pounds, expenses paid, gas and oil, things of that nature. But then when Johnny left, he set up the United Construction Workers in the District 50. Buck went to work with the District 50, Buck Boyle, and just before he went into service. And
but he quit when Lewis started, left the CIO and started.
He went into service when he left. He went to service. But Buck had talked to me a good bit before. He thought he was going to be able to have a freer hand when he went in. I warned him it wasn't. He would. I come from a mining area. You're gonna find different. And he admitted to me that he didn't find the things like he thought.
What were you warning him against?
Not having any as much democratic freedom in the UMW as he did in Amalgamated.
I see.
And the reason he was leaving Amalgamated was the things that he didn't think he was given a free enough hand in making decisions and organizing, and he thought he'd have more. And I told him I didn't think he'd find that to be true. And he admitted to me just before he left to win the service that he found it to be like I said. But because I was in the old fights back home with the guys trying to fight for autonomy. But anyway, Ed was sent up there, and Franz Daniel was working on Amalgamated, and he went in there. And they jumped on Franz and Ed and beat him up, and come into the Union Hall, beat him up, shot Franz. But they didn't kill him, because the chief police told me later that the guy said that the shot was fired and he couldn't find. And he said that when Franz opened up he had his wallet sticking in his breast pocket, opened up, and there was a bullet lodged in the money. But then that happened. Well, Gladys called me to come up there.
Gladys Dickinson.
Yeah, she was Southern Director, and she called me to.
Now, explain to me exactly what the mine workers were trying to do. I mean, how did this conflict between the two unions in La Follette?
Well, they had been trying for some time to persuade the girls to leave the Amalgamated and to join their union, and they couldn't do it.
Now, I don't understand what the mine workers are doing to organize.
Well, they weren't mine workers. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The mine workers had set up this, what they call the United Construction Workers, the catch-all, as they did the District 50. Were supposed to organize in the byproducts from coal, like the smeltering and the gas places. And that was supposed to be that union. The United Construction Workers were supposed to take up anything else. Whether it be crafts, they were going to organize everything. He's going to be UMW to be the labor movement. So they was the ones that called themselves United Construction Workers, and they had hired Clifford Lay, who was an ex-sheriff there, and the next local union president, Silas Huddleston, who was involved in this Ublonsky thing, as the organizer.
Silas
Huddleston. And we had a closed shop union agreement in there. And I'm not closed shop, union shop. Everybody who worked had to belong to the union. We also have in our Constitution bylaws that you can't belong to two unions at the same time in the jurisdiction. A couple of girls had signed, and the workers brought charges against them, and they were discharged for dual unionism. Now, that was the only two we ever had. They never had no other problems. No, girls wouldn't join because they didn't want to lose jobs. In fact, I had the United Mine Workers representatives tell me later that we certainly serviced the people better than they did. They would have said this openly, but they told me privately. And that then they're sorry, because I knew all those people.
Why were they doing this?
Well, really, I think that Lewis was bitter. I think that he expected a lot more attention from Roosevelt than he had gotten. He was jealous of Hillman's popularity and influence, and with Roosevelt in the administration. And I think that is the main thing, really. And I believe I'm right. So they couldn't, well, getting ahead of myself. I went in there in 43 and was able to hold them local until 46 when they brought a bunch down there and tried to keep the girls from going into work. We had to physically fight, to get our way into the plants. To carry out our contract. We had gone into work, we'd forfeit our contract. So we had a pretty bad struggle.
Now,
but I think it was pure power struggle with John L. Trying to take everything away he could from the CIO.
Who had been business agent there before you?
Oh, well, from the time it was organized, the girls paid their own business agent. The members paid their own. I shouldn't say girls. We used to say girls for the majority. Hired a man, Bob Owen, but they had gotten dissatisfied with him, and so the Amalgamated couldn't do anything about it since he was hired by them, because they couldn't fire him, and the girls of the local union paid him, and he had enough political strength and others. But as time went on, we were able to get it so that we could service from the national office. I don't know just how the mechanics of that come about.
Was it unusual for...
Maybe the local union decided they didn't have the money and let the national office pay the business agent. It wasn't working out.
Was it unusual for a woman to be business agent when you went in there as business agent?
Yes. You see, most of our people, well, we'd had a few women that, Dorothy Blanca and Jewel Monas. In the East, we'd had active women in the movement, but down here we didn't have nothing. Didn't have nothing. Down here, let's see, our local was organized and had a woman business agent. So no, it wasn't for the South, for Amalgamated to have one.
How did the workers feel about having a woman business agent?
They didn't like it.
The women workers themselves didn't like it. The women wanted a male man.
Yeah, that's like I say, they didn't resist me, but I had known some history of the thing.
They had tried to put Zilphia Horton in as business agent, right? And they had the workers themselves had resisted that.
And I don't think they might not have resented her as much as a woman as they felt like she wasn't one of them. Anyway, when I went in there, I knew something about how the people felt, working and closing around and hearing things. So I got up and I made them a talk. And I said, now I want to tell you people something. I said, I'm in here to work with you. And I'm going to do my job. And there'll be times when I'll have to side with the company, because the company's going to be right. And I don't want you feeling that I've sold you out. I don't want to hear nobody saying I've sold you out. I'll be very frank to tell you that I think you're wrong. And I'll fight for you when you're right. When you're wrong, I'm going to be big enough to tell you. And if y'all don't trust me, if you're not going to cooperate with me, now's the time to say it. If you have any misgivings, now's the time to let's have them out in the open. Nobody open their mouth. And I think they watched me. I proved myself. I worked with them. I got along good with them. They found out that I fight her. And when the chips was down, I stood my ground. And they respected me. The companies respected me. And I got along fine. But after that, just about every business agent I had to they couldn't have a business agent of their own. They had to, and we lost the biggest shop. They couldn't afford we couldn't afford to keep a business agent there, just one shop.
You lost the Atlas plant?
Finally we lost we lost the Imperial La Follette Shirt Company, which hired most.
Well,
We finally lost
this
it
is just
to the construction workers, and we couldn't. After that, just about every business agent put in, I had to go in there and calm the people down, talk to them, and get them to accept it. I mean, they still didn't want nobody back over there but me. And they complained to me constantly about it.
Well, this just shows my ignorance.
They thought they knew more than anybody else because it was an old local.
Yes.
And these new kids coming in, that just, although they were good business agents, they just thought they knew more than the business agents. Because they hadn't been in the union as long as they had.
Explain, this is just a question about the way unions work, but I can't get clear exactly. If you had organized these two plants, the Amalgamated had organized these two plants in La Follette. It's a union shop. They had a contract. Now, how did that question get raised again so that the construction workers union could get a wedge into that?
Well, they just come in and they weren't they was independent. They just decided they was going to try to take them out of join their union and come out of the Amalgamated.
So they were just in there trying to
sign the people up. Yeah. We call raiding.
And there's not anything to keep another union from doing that. I mean, that's a legitimate.
That's right. Except we have the AFL-CIO has a pact. No raiding pact that some people have signed. But still doesn't.
It still happens.
A lot of people. The jurisdiction isn't clear cut as it used to be.
Were a lot of the men still? Were a lot of these women in the Amalgamated the wives of the very men who were doing the raiding? I mean, was there?
That's what I'm trying to tell you. Most of these people that was down there had never worked in a mine.
They were not the same.
The day they come down there trying to break in our union hall, there's a man standing out there that told me later, he said, I didn't see but 2 or 3 miners. No, they weren't just riffraff, taxi drivers, just anybody they could pick up and lick her up.
I see.
Oh, it was a mess. And it certainly wasn't done with the people in the shop doing it.
So what happened?
The mob
when you
trying
went there?
to scare the workers.
Did you know you were going into a dangerous situation?
Yes.
How did you feel about that?
Well, this job had to be done. It wasn't the first one I'd been in.
Have you had any, have you had any close calls as you've gone along in your career? I mean, have you had to?
No, not really. I've been where there's been trouble. I mean, one time in Alabama, we were talking to a girl and her husband, and some men come and literally took them out of our car, right in our front of it, in broad daylight. Kidnapped them, took them out, and beat them up. Again, I was with my sister. She was down there. So she was a textile worker. I was laid off, but I was with her because I was actually the one that knew what to do. And we drove down there, talked to this couple, and they let 2 carloads of people, blocked us, drug them out of our car, and took them off.
So what happened in La Follette then?
Then, well, I stayed in there for 3 years, but I was constantly under surveillance. I had to be very careful not to be out at night and to stay in the union hall or at the hotel or go eat at the restaurant. I had to watch myself. Be very careful. And then when they really began to try to take it away by force in 1946, they began to beat up some of the girls' husbands, shooting the houses. It's bad. I hate to even talk about it because they sat in front of our union hall and watched us try to intimidate a bunch of men. And
how did the women workers react to that intimidation?
Well, they stuck it out, but there when they saw that, you see, Clifford Lay had gotten back elected sheriff. And the miners knew then they could do as they pleased, see. Because he was sheriff and he got defeated. The miners put him on their payroll because he'd always been, friendly with them. So when he got elected back sheriff, it was just open season on us. There was no law. Law was at a breakdown. And they tried to, they said, oh, kind of, it's unsafe for us to walk the streets. And they come over there and we tried to fight them, kept the shop. We got a majority of our people into work. But the company shut down because of the hassle. So one of our representatives made a mistake and wrote a letter. See, we had a binding contract. And, of course, during the time, the people had such a hassle, they knew they had to work. And they knew as long as the fight was going on, they were going to be in danger. And the miners, there wasn't no law. It wasn't being enforced, and they was going to have to fight every day to get into the factory. So they petitioned, got enough members signed up to petition for an election. So one of the smart elections, he didn't stay with us long, I got the letter out after that. He took the notion upon himself to answer the petition. And he put down in there, he was the type of guy that said too much, and he gave them enough information because we were discussing a wage increase. It was in our contract that we could reopen that contract any time for a wage increase.
I see.
And he built that into the record where the board had to give him an election because our contract was open. It was only open for protection of wages. But if he'd have wrote it right, but if he'd asked me before he wrote the thing. But the guy who was Southern director then, he was lazy and he let this guy do all that kind of work, and the guy didn't even consult me, and he answered the thing and put down in there that we had. I went to all the great document about, and when I read it, I called him up and I said, "You have played hell." But anyway, they got an election.
So that opened it up to an election.
Yeah, but we like to beat them. We like to beat them even then in the election. But I knew I couldn't win the election in the face of all the violence that went on. In the meantime, we'd had the sheriff put out. I was able to. We had enough. No, he resigned, but he was going to get impeached because we had enough power with the governor, enough evidence to prove that he hadn't. And also, his car had hit he was hauling liquor. We were pretty sure. Hit a guy up the valley and killed him. Pretty sure it was his car. And anyhow, had enough stuff on him too. But he resigned. So they put the chief of police, who had been chief of police, who was a very good man, Henry Sutton, who had gone to work with the railroad as railroad detective. And they put him in as temporary sheriff, and he was sheriff. And I had told the people that we would have law and order. And now we could support it, but they just couldn't believe it. They just felt like these miners would still, if they didn't let them have their way, would keep them out of the job. So we lost the election. So they after the election, they didn't hardly have enough people in the plant to open up the factory that's all over our union hall. So Donald Cooper, the plant manager, and his owner's son calls me up. Said, "Miss McGill," said, "why don't you tell the people to come on back to work?" I said, "You must be mistaken, Donald. I don't represent them people no more. I don't care what they do." He said, "Oh, I know you better than that. You do care." And practically all, the majority was still over there at our hall crying and they were sorry what happened, but they, I understood it and I told them. And a lot of them were sitting right there that had voted the other way, but they were still regretting it. They still, I guess all of them hoping there'd be enough of them to pull on through. But some of us people never would go back to work. The president local never would, and the girl here in Atlanta never would. Said, I'll never pay no dues to that, the way they done. And they would never go back to work there. So we held the little shop. They never was able to get through there. The company shut down. The company saw the other company got a good deal out of them. See, they didn't know nothing about making shirts, so the company just had their way. Same as practically having no union, and they had nobody to. So our other company saw, well, that's a good deal, you see. So they didn't have any work right at that time, so they shut down the shop for a couple of weeks, and didn't have no work. So when they opened back up, work was still a little slack, and they started violating the contract. Oh, they just wouldn't live up to the contract at all. They started cutting wages, just doing every which way. So the girls walked out on strike. All of them walked out. I said, oh my God, and they didn't have no work to begin with. You know, the material, the war was over, and the government hadn't got, switched from government material back to regular fabric, so we get material to make dress shirts or sport shirts. All the mills had been on government stuff. So they called me up one night first and said, the buttonhole workers, and said, Eula, we're going in, we think our rate's cut, and we're going in the office in the morning and find out, and if they tell us our rate's cut, we're going to walk out. And I said, well, now, if you walk out, you may be walked out for a long time. And I said, we got a contract to uphold, and I have to tell them that. And they said, well, you hear what we're saying. Well, our rate's cut, we're walking out. So next morning they went in the office, and the office girl told them it was. So they walked out, and everybody walked out with them. So they come down to Union Hall. And I told them, I said, now, there's not much work. I said, we may be out for a long time. And they stuck it out. So one day I was sitting there in the office, and President Local called me. No, one of the girls called me. President Local's in the office. She said, Danny, he's one of the bosses at the plant, called me and said he wanted me to come down and talk to him. I said, that's one good thing about them people up there. They never made a move. They didn't ask somebody. They wasn't getting right for the boss to call them at home and ask them nothing. They always worked through the union. Said, have you heard anything about it? I said, no, I ain't heard nothing about it. Hung up the phone. A few minutes, another girl called me. Hey, you, Danny just called me and said he wanted me to come down and talk to him. Has he talked to you? I said, no, I ain't heard nothing. So then I pick up the phone to call the plant, to tell Danny if he wants to talk to anybody, the president of the local is there, and she'll call a meeting for him. The operator plugs me in, and he's talking to his brother-in-law in New York, who's the owner, George Salzman. So I hear the whole day. They're figuring out how they're going to be able to bypass the union and get the people back to break the union. And the operator, I believe she did it on purpose. So back then you'd have dial phones. I'll listen to it. I held the phone out and let the president local listen to it too. So we just hung the phone up. So he couldn't get nobody to meet with him, so finally he has to call. But he don't call me. He has the pressing room for me to call. Young fella. So he called me up and said, hey, Eula, we'd like to talk with you. I said, okay. When? He said, when can you come up here? I said, y'all come down here. I said, it'll be just as far from me as it is for you. You just come on down to Union Hall. I said, most of the officers are here, and I'll have the rest of them here when you get here. So they come in and come. I said, first thing I want to tell you is this. I said, before you called us for me, now we've always in the past, all of our dealings with, when you wanted to meet or anything, you called us hall and said, we'd like to meet, and we got arranged. We got our people together, and we met. Now this time you've been calling around, trying to get the people to meet and bypass the local union officers and myself. Not only that, I said, I heard that conversation you had with George, Danny, and I know what you're up to. And I said, when we first come out on strike, I said, what it would take to settle it would have been restoring all those rates you cut and settle all those unsettled grievances. But now, since you've had this conversation with George and you're so uncertain as to the status of our contract, we want a whole new contract. It just so happened that they had gotten some material and was anxious to get into production on a new line of shirts. Do you know we got a contract and the boss signed it and never did read it? And that was the best contract we ever got up there. It was our standard union agreement, written before it was ever negotiated on or cut down or a compromise made. It was all right except one thing. It had a 20% differential for cloth differential, and we only had 10% in the other places. And after he signed it, we rubbed that 20 out and put 10 because we didn't think it was fair for him to pay something the other bosses would. But he was so anxious, see, that he signed the contract. So we held that local till George got old and his son would not, he couldn't operate the business and nobody operated for him, so he finally had to shut it down.
Let me ask you one last general question and then we'll close up for today. What kind of effect has being a union organizer had on you as a person? I mean, what kind of person do you see yourself as being in comparison to the kind of person you were when you started out? I mean,
oh no, if you don't grow and learn in anything you do, I think the union has given me an opportunity to go places, to learn things, and take advantage of a lot of things I would never have been able to have done as a worker in the plant. And I appreciate that, although I don't ever think of myself, just like I said, I don't think of myself as noble and smarter than any of the girls at the machine. Most of them that work at the machine could do the same thing I do if they had the opportunity and the chance, and wanted to do it. You see, and had the opportunity and wanted to do it. And I've always put the union first because I felt like it's cause of me being where I am today. It's opened doors for me, given me the chance, and I've taken advantage of everything I could through that opportunity. And when I speak of the union, I speak of not of the officers of the International Union, but the E-Union, which is the backbone of the workers in the plant, who is the union.
But are there other women that are in